Historic Preservation Program. Welcome to the Sandwiching and History Tour of Pulaski Heights Baptist Church. I'd like to thank Pulaski Heights Baptist for allowing us to tour their beautiful church today, and I especially like to thank Edwina Mann. Where's Edwina? Where are you, Edwina? There you are. Edwina helped me tremendously with this tour. Reverend Jim Munns, who's unable to be with us today, and Errol Austin, who I think is upstairs in the balcony up there. Thank Errol for helping me with all of our technology today. Also want to mention before I forget that if you are an architect, you can get 1 hour of AIA continuing education credit for being here at the Sandwiching and History Tour. So if you're interested in that, please see my colleague Patricia Blick over here in the green after the tour to get information on how to get those credits. Pulaski Heights Baptist Church is located in the Hillcrest Historic District, which was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1990 and amended in 1992. The district is now roughly bounded by Markham Street on the south, Woodrow on the east, North Lookout on the north, and Harrison on the west. The congregation of Pulaski Heights Baptist Church just celebrated their centennial anniversary on the weekend of August 23rd through the 25th. However, the church's physical plant has evolved over time. In other words, not all of the buildings and additions here that are now part of Pulaski Heights campus are 100 years old. So we'll talk about that. First, I want you to just relax and make sure you're comfortable because I'm going to talk to you for a while about Pulaski Heights and the neighborhood that we're in today. Little Rock incorporated as a town in 1831 and a city in 1835. The original city of Little Rock was bounded on the north by the Arkansas River, on the east by the Quapaw Line, which is roughly modern-day Commerce Street, on the south by Wright Avenue, and on the west by Pulaski Street. After the Civil War, Little Rock experienced rapid population growth and a significant building boom. Additions were platted immediately to the south, east, and the west of the original city. In 1871, the Memphis and Little Rock Railroad became the first operating railroad in the state. Just 2 years later, the Cairo and Fulton line was completed to Little Rock, bringing the first train in from St. Louis. The railroads brought added prosperity, but the nationwide financial panic of 1873 slowed residential development. Between 1874 and 1876, no residential additions were platted in the city. Although Little Rock didn't grow much in the 1870s, between 1880 and 1890, the city's population exhibited a 97% increase. It grew from 13,000 to over 25,000. The city continued to grow at an impressive rate and eventually had to move further westward into the foothills of the Ouachita Mountains. By the 1890s, much of the flat delta land immediately around the original city was subdivided and developed. The city couldn't expand to the north because of the river, it couldn't go to the east because of the river's floodplain further downstream, and it couldn't go to the south because of Fush Bayou, so it had to go to the west. Also, the city's unique geographical position, what I just mentioned, and then the extension of the streetcar line, that would enable residential development to the northwest of downtown. In January 1890, Henry Franklin Otten and Edgar Eugene Moss, attorneys from St. John's, Michigan, arrived in Little Rock. Otten and Moss opened a law office here in Little Rock, and then they began to investigate the potential for residential development. After securing contributions from Michigan and Little Rock investors, in 1891, Otten and Moss incorporated the Pulaski Heights Land Company in order to purchase 800 acres just west of downtown Little Rock. In November 1892, the first 10 blocks of the Pulaski Heights addition were platted, but the lack of a good transportation route plagued those developers, and only 8 families, the Otten and the Moss families and their other fellow investors, actually built homes here in the 1890s. In the fall of 1903, the Little Rock Traction and Electric Railway Company sent the first streetcars into Pulaski Heights. From downtown Little Rock, streetcars headed west on both Markham and Capitol, then they turned on to Victory Street, where they converged and turned west on 3rd to head further west out to Pulaski Heights. The streetcar line continued west on 3rd until it became West Markham, and then it turned off on Prospect Avenue, which is now Kavanaugh Boulevard, at Stiff Station, so named because there was a streetcar station or stop there. And Prospect Avenue, Kavanaugh Boulevard meandered through the neighborhood and kind of slowly curves up to where we are here. But the reason why I did that was to avoid steep grades, because the streetcar couldn't pull up a really steep hill like Cantrell Hill. It couldn't do that. So it had to meander really slowly, following the path of least resistance. And after that, the easier access was provided from downtown, the many additions were platted in Pulaski Heights. By 1903, the Country Club of Little Rock purchased its current site on the northern edge of what was then Pulaski Heights, and boasted 125 members, as well as a $12,000 clubhouse, a golf course, and tennis courts. The following year, the Mountain Park Land Company leased a 160-acre tract of land bounded by Hayes Street, which is now University, Prospect, now Kavanaugh, Taylor Street, and undeveloped forest on the north, and the streetcar company, they leased it there to build a park at the western end of the streetcar line, of course to entice riders to ride all the way out to the end of the line. Forest Park is what it was called, and it contained an auditorium, a bandstand, carnival rides, a dance hall, and gardens. Pulaski Heights developers used the streetcar, the country club, and advertising points to attract prospective buyers, as well as the park. And it worked. Lots sold quickly in the Heights, and in order to finance public improvements, namely the paving of city streets and the creation of sidewalks, on August 1st, 1905, the town of Pulaski Heights was incorporated with a population of between 300 and 400 people. Interestingly, the town of Pulaski Heights was bounded by Lee Avenue on the south, and the other boundaries are pretty well understood, but Lee Avenue was the southern boundary of Pulaski Heights, and although many people consider Hillcrest and the Heights to go all the way down to Markham, it didn't. That section between Lee and Markham at the bottom was always part of the city of Little Rock. It was never really part of the town of Pulaski Heights. And that explains why, if you're familiar with the neighborhood at Lee Street, the streets kind of jog, kind of dog leg as they cross over Lee. That's because the streets didn't line up. The streets on the north of Lee were part of Pulaski Heights, on the bottom south of Lee were part of the city of Little Rock, and even back in the day, the street names didn't line up. So you have a pine on the north and not necessarily pine matching up on the other side of Lee. But they got that all fixed. About 1911, the Pulaski Heights Land Company published a pamphlet called Beautiful Pulaski Heights, which listed amenities like the streetcar, the parks, the country club, the waterworks, sewer system, proximity to 3 state institutions, which is kind of the Capitol, the state hospital, and the Dutch school. Those were all amenities. Pulaski Heights School, electricity, river views, healthy living, and pure air and water, because you're up at a higher elevation than downtown. The pamphlet made strong appeals to readers, asking them, quote, "Why live in the slums of the city when you can own a home on the Heights for half the cost?" The promotional material concluded with a list of 18 reasons to invest in Pulaski Heights, number 16 of which read, quote, "Because you are not a chump." If you were a chump, then don't invest. However, the success of Pulaski Heights contributed to its demise as a town as well. In 1916, the quickly expanding and largely affluent suburb was annexed by Little Rock. As promised before consolidation, Little Rock constructed a fire station in the Heights, and they also built street lights and fire hydrants. Between 1920 and 1930, 9 additions were platted in Pulaski Heights, securing its status as one of Little Rock's premier neighborhoods. Prospect Avenue was renamed to Kavanaugh Boulevard in 1936 in honor of William Marmaduke Kavanaugh, who served as managing editor of the Arkansas Gazette. He was also a Pulaski County Sheriff, Pulaski County Judge, and briefly a U.S. Senator, and he was heavily involved in civic, social, and political affairs. While serving as judge in 1900, Kavanaugh supported the county's construction of the road over going west from downtown to Pulaski Heights, greatly aiding the area's development, so thus the renaming of the road after him. Also, kind of interesting about Alsip Park, which we're kind of back up to over here on the other side. In 1906, a suspension footbridge was built across the south ravine of Alsip Park to provide residents of the Hillcrest Addition, which the Hillcrest Addition is just one small part of Pulaski Heights and not even where we are right now, which is now considered Hillcrest. It's kind of confusing. The Hillcrest Addition was platted in 1906, and that is the little finger-shaped area bounded by Hillcrest Avenue and going out along North and South Lookout. That's all that's really the Hillcrest Addition. So the little footbridge was built to connect the Hillcrest Addition, so South Lookout, all the way across the ravine over here to Kavanaugh, so they could reach the streetcar stop a little bit easier. And all that's left there are the concrete bridge piers, but they're still out in Alsip Park. In 1925, about behind the name of the park, in 1925, newspaperman, book collector, and bookstore owner Frederick William Alsip built a house that overlooked the South Ravine on South Lookout. It's no longer extant. In 1927, probably after some encouragement from Alsip, the city of Little Rock purchased the undeveloped ravines, 150 acres of undeveloped ravines in Pulaski Heights, and turned them into a city park. And then, of course, that would be named after him, dedicated in 1931. Another interesting point, Alsip commissioned a well-known landscape architect from Cambridge named John Nolan to design a master plan for Alsip Park. And Nolan had been here before, but he didn't have at that point detailed knowledge of the topography of the area. So he designed this master plan, said put a theater in this one area, all these other things, and come to find out, you could not implement that plan once it was done because it was so steep. The steep grade wouldn't allow for any of the plans that he had drawn up. So none of that was ever put into place. Pulaski Heights streetcar stopped running in 1947, and I've been told another really interesting thing. I've been told that the parking lot behind the church, are y'all all familiar with that parking lot going up Cedar to the west? That was just a hill with a really steep grade to it originally, and then after the streetcar stopped running in 47, sometime in the late 50s, the city of Little Rock owned that land behind the church, and it was backed up to Alsip Park, and they made a deal with the church that they were to raise the grade of that area and pave over it for a parking lot, and the church maintained it. And they could have extra parking on Sundays, and they could also use it as a parking lot for Alsip Park. But what they filled the hole with were all the streetcar tracks from along Kavanaugh and all the brick street pavers. I've been told that, so that's interesting too. All right, now to the church. About 1906, a congregational church building was constructed on the north side of Prospect Avenue or Kavanaugh. That's a 1913 San Juan Fire Insurance Company map. You can see it kind of helps to make sense of which buildings I'm talking about as we go through the different properties that are now part of Pulaski Heights Baptist. The highlighted building on the 1913 map is the Congregational Church that was built in 1906. There's still a Congregational Church on that map. So it's built there. Then Mrs. H.F. Otten, if you remember, one of the developers of Pulaski Heights was Henry Franklin Otten. His wife was a member of the Congregational Church, and she had considerable influence on that building's design. She was very impressed by classical architecture on a trim to Europe, and whenever she came back, she said the church needs to look like this, we need to have this kind of columns in the front and so on. The Congregational Church building also served as a meeting place for the Pulaski Heights Town Council, and it was a town assembly hall in the early years before the Morgan Smith building was constructed at Beechwood and Kavanaugh in 1915. On February 23rd, 1912, the Pulaski Heights Baptist Ladies Aid Society was organized by Mrs. C.L. Durrett, Mrs. C.B. Maxwell, Mrs. A. Westbrook, and Mrs. T.G. McKenzie, with the goal of starting a Baptist church in the Heights. And Bible study and prayer meetings were held at the various members' homes, and then the women sold aprons and other items to raise money for the cause. By May, they invited the Secretary of the Baptist State Mission Board to meet with them. A committee was soon formed to look at possible lots for purchase. A down payment of $70 raised by the Ladies Society was made for 3 lots on Prospect or Kavanaugh between Rose and Walnut, so a little bit further west. On August 7, 1913, Dr. John T. Christian, who was Secretary of the Arkansas State Mission Board, assisted the ladies and called a meeting of people interested in establishing a Baptist church in the Heights. They assembled in the Congregational Church building. And soon after their meeting, what do you know, the Congregational Church building went up for sale. And the Baptist group purchased the property for $24,000 with the help of a $4,000 loan from the State Mission Board. On August 30th, 1913, the Pulaski Heights Baptist Church was organized with 45 charter members. Dr. E.P.J. Garrett was the first pastor. It's kind of hard to see on that sandboard, but there it is. The building right behind the Congregational Church was a little frame gymnasium, and so they got that as well. And the gymnasium, located north of the church, there was also a swimming pool out here, just to the east of the original sanctuary building, and those were both open to the public in the early years. The 1917 Pulaski Heights Baptist Church newsletter advertised that you could get 20 swim sessions for $1.50, with separate hours, of course, for male and female bathers, no mixed bathing. Big deal. In 1935, the church purchased the lot to the west of the original sanctuary for an education building, which opened in 1939. So it's a 1939 map. They hadn't quite done that yet. So all that's different on that map from the first one is that the name of the church has changed to Pulaski Heights Baptist. Now this one you can kind of see there's another building over there, just to the west, the Sunday school classroom building. They built that in 1939. The Buff Brick Education Building, that's an old picture of them, the two buildings I'm talking about. The Buff Brick Education Building was designed by the Little Rock architectural firm of Urquhart and Eichenbaum in a restrained version of the colonial revival style, with a symmetrical facade, multi-pane windows, and a simple parapet at the front entrance. The education building housed the pastor's office and an administrative area on the top floor, which is the floor that's at street level, and on the bottom floor, there were 4 Sunday school classrooms. In April 1942, Dr. W. Harold Hicks became pastor of Pulaski Heights Baptist, and under his leadership, the church grew and planned to construct a new sanctuary. However, these plans were delayed until after World War II. In 1947, a special meeting was called to decide if they wanted to remain here at this location or if they wanted to build at another site, and they decided to stay here, and they purchased the lot where we are now at the northwest corner of Kavanaugh and Cedar. And if you look, if you remember from the sandboard maps, there were 2 houses to the east of the original Congregational Church. So this house in the corner where the red dot is, you can see that. That house is where we are now. That house was gone by about 1940, but it was one of the earliest homes built out here in Pulaski Heights. That's an original sanctuary interior. Before I skip to this building, I think that's the only picture they have of the inside. Is that correct? No. The only picture of the inside that they have. And we'll go in there here in a little bit. There's now we're on to 1950-51 building that we're in today. On January 1st, 1950, ground was broken for a new sanctuary. It was completed in 1951 at a cost of about $400,000, and that included the site, the building, and the furnishings. The new building was designed by the Little Rock architectural firm of Makinich and Maker in the colonial revival style, featuring a triangular pediment, the dental course at the cornice supported by 4 fluted ionic columns, as well as a smaller front door crowned by broken pediment. The sanctuary's east and west elevations, side elevations, feature large arched windows with keystones. The original church building later became a recreation building, with the sanctuary, which is on the top level, even with the street, is now a gymnasium, and the bottom floor is a small dining area that's currently used by the day school. For several years after the completion of the 1951 sanctuary, there was the other house. There were 2 houses over here, I told you. There was a house called the Chambers Cobb House. It's located just out here to the west of this building. So there was a house right in between the old sanctuary and the new sanctuary for several years. And that was another old house in Hillcrest or in the Heights. Mrs. Earl Chambers and her mother were early arrivals, and they probably built that house about 1903, right after the streetcar line was completed. And it was later occupied by the Cobb family. And the youngest Cobb daughter, Marion Cobb, sold the house to the church in 1954 for $22,500. In 1963, the church made plans to construct a 3-story addition to connect the old sanctuary with the new sanctuary. So I pointed that out when I'm talking about the part in the middle. So the new education addition, which included a dining and a recreation area, was completed in 1967 and was designed by Little Rock architect and church member Scott Farrell. In 1968, the Pulaski Heights Baptist Church Day School was founded, and they occupied the 1939 Education Building. In 1988, church members Leon and Francis Fields purchased the building across the street, that building, at Woodlawn and Kavanaugh, which had previously housed the Dr. John McCullough Smith Clinic, and they donated that building to the church. It's now known as the Field Center. It was originally used to house their singles ministry program, now used to house families that have other family members in the hospital, usually at Children's or UAMS, and they need a temporary residence in Little Rock. They can stay there for free. The most recent renovations to the Pulaski Heights Baptist Church complex were completed in 1993 and included some renovations to the sanctuary and to Hicks Hall, which is the dining area or fellowship hall, as well as alterations to the 1960s education building, including the addition of an elevator, an atrium, a prayer room, and that all required them to bump the front facade of that addition out towards Kavanaugh a little bit. In the 1990s, renovation was done by the Little Rock architectural firm of Lewis, Odom, Elliott, and Studer being a church member here. In 1996, I saw him come in, Dr. Randy Hyde over here, who snuck in, became pastor of Pulaski Heights Baptist Church, and currently leads the church today. One of the church's new outreach ministries is the Hillcrest Farmers Market, which started in 2011 with the help of a grant from the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. The market is open year-round on Saturday mornings inside whenever it gets cold, and the fall-winter hours are 8 a.m. until noon. And the present physical plant for Pulaski Heights Baptist consists of 5 different parts: the 1951 sanctuary, office, and classroom building, which we're in now, the 1960s education and fellowship hall building, which is just this way to the west, the recreation building, which is the old sanctuary, now the gymnasium, children's building / day school, which is the 1939 education building, and the field center across the street. So you can see how it's confusing. A couple weekends ago, Pulaski Heights Baptist celebrated the centennial anniversary, like I told you at the beginning, and it remains the only church on Kavanaugh. Now, some details about the building and then here the sanctuary. The 1951 part that we're in originally had a slate roof, which was replaced in 2011 with a metal roof. And the steeple on this part of the church has a copper roof. There's cobalt glass in the windows. The 2 recessed arches on the west side, these 2 over here, they were originally open windows. The 2 arches over here, correspond, were never open. So I don't know exactly what. My only guess to that would be that maybe on a Sunday morning with the sun coming up on the east side, not to have blinding sunlight in your eyes if you were up here at the pulpit. But those were later closed. They were open originally. The sanctuary has its original plaster work throughout, so you can see all the dental cornice going around the top of the room and the papyrus capitals on the pilasters around the room. And they did a renovation of the sanctuary in the late 60s, 67, 68, and did a couple kind of big things that you notice whenever you walk in. 2 of those being the big chandeliers. Those are Colonial Williamsburg reproduction chandeliers that were put in the 60s, as well as all the wall sconces going down both sides. Those are all reproduction put in the 60s. They cut the holes in the solid wood doors going out to the vestibule in that renovation so that you wouldn't get hit in the face or you're going back and forth because they were solid wood, you couldn't see if somebody was on the other side. They also put in a movable pulpit and chancel around that time. The pipe organ was installed in 1967, and it was manufactured by Cossamont Brothers out of Quebec, Canada. And a little bit of information about that. The organ was actually built in Canada to the church's specifications, and they plated, made sure it worked how they wanted it to. Then they took it all apart and stamped each piece PHBC from Pulaski Heights Baptist Church, and each piece has a number. They shipped it to Little Rock, sent their technicians to Little Rock, reassembled it here, and then plated it. That's how they installed that. And they just replastered these front arches used to extend down long like those do in the front where the PowerPoint is showing. Those were replastered recently so that they could do the audio-visual stuff in the sanctuary. And they just redid tower behind the baptistry. It's now the Apostles' Cross. That was a painted mural of the Jordan River previously that had deteriorated, so they got that redone too just recently. Does anybody have any questions about anything right now while I can hear you? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Back in the medieval period, when I was growing up, when we went in back of the church, there were two roads, one down and one down the and another one that went down. When was it closed?
The one that goes down, went down to the park?
Yes, I guess it went to the park.
I don't know when that one was closed. I know what you're talking about. I don't know when they closed it to traffic, though. Does anybody know? When they close, she's asking when they close the street that goes down. 70 or something. We ride it. Okay. Any other questions? You want to hear the order? Well, I can't help you out with that. I'm not going to do that. Sorry. Anything? Yes, sir. The swimming pool, and I can show you, we're going to go through the different parts of the church so you can kind of better understand, and I'll talk a little bit more as we're doing that. But from right here, if you were to imagine looking out that window on the west side, kind of closer to the old sanctuary building, that's where the pool was.
There is a sidewalk on the side of the old building.
Okay, so she's telling you exactly where it was.
Did they ever have a stage land?
In here? In this sanctuary? No, I don't believe so. I believe they were always the cobalt glass in the windows. And the other sanctuary didn't either, I don't think. They had really decorative, kind of, geometric shaped panes in the windows of that sanctuary, but they're not there anymore. They weren't stained glass. Anything else before we look around? Okay. Well, thank you for coming if you were about to split. But if you're not about to split, we're going to go right out here to the vestibule and go down the stairs. You can go either side, go down, and then we'll go look through the building. Thanks, guys. The doors on your right, those were all classrooms. Now it's the nursery. But then to your left, where the concrete block wall is to make the hallway, that wasn't always there. It was just open to the fellowship hall, and it was completely surrounded by classrooms. Okay. Fellowship hall, and this wall wasn't here, so you can see straight through the whole fellowship hall. And this area right here, where the library is, this was the stage. And if you look carefully, you see the two doors here on either side. That's how you can come up onto the stage from back behind. And the room right there, through this doorway that's behind the stage, was the kitchen. And now it's another library. So I'll just keep on heading that way and kind of hang out at the end of the hallway. And I'll try to make sure everybody has heard that. Whenever you came through, you saw the parking lot out behind the church building. That's the parking lot I was talking about with the steep grade. They filled it in with the streetcar rails and the brick pavers. And that backs right up to Allsop Park. And what we're in now is called Hicks Hall, named after Reverend and Mrs. Hicks. They named it after them in 1987. He served as pastor of the church from 1942 until 1971.
Wow.
The one now you're in the old Congregational Church building, which was the first building for Pulaski Heights Baptist. This is the lower level, which is now the dining area for the day school. You see little people chairs. And these booths are from the Minuteman in downtown Little Rock. Yeah, sure. And then we're waiting on a key to go through this door and go up to what was the original sanctuary. Now it's the gym. So, this is it.
They don't have a daycare over?
Yeah. They do. The day school is operational. Yes. Yes. I don't know why, but they're somewhere else. Yeah. They said these people are coming. That's right. Congregational church building. This would have been the main sanctuary. The picture I showed of the interior, that was in here, if you can imagine that. So all the window openings have been enclosed on both sides, elevations, and the little area up here, this was the balcony of the church. And that's evident on Sanborn maps. And the ceiling was a little bit lower. The picture makes it look like, the interior photograph makes it look like the ceiling was much lower, but it wasn't that much lower. And then there was just kind of a little balcony in the back. So it became the gym after they built their 51 sanctuary. Anybody have any questions in here? We can just go right outside, and I can kind of point to you from the outside which buildings are which, if that would help, and then we can be done. The building's made out of concrete block, and it has that brick veneer over it to make it match the 60s edition. And they also put the dental course and bricked over the windows and the side elevations to make it match the 60s edition in the middle. Right around here and down the hill back that way was the swimming pool on that side. That's the 1939 education building. Over here, the Buff Brick building. The field center is right behind you. The former doctor clinic they got in '88. You know the 60s edition in the middle and the 1951 sanctuary building on the corner. So that's kind of how all the pieces fit together. Any questions?
How many days did you put all together?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know. Yes, which was the first home of Pulaski Heights Baptist. 1906. They got it in 1913.